Hello and welcome to my channel, iWinToLose Gaming. We are currently experiencing one of the greatest dramas in gacha history, 44111 vs 43311. In today's video, I'll talk about this entrancing topic to settle this drama once and for all in Wuthering Waves. Alright, I've seen many comments and a lot of discussion surrounding the topic of 44111 vs 43311. And it's been a while since we've had some juicy theory crafting discourse. And this one might just rival the Zhongli debacle of Genshin Impact. Okay, I'm just joking about that. This is not nearly as intense since that literally led to death threats to Hoyoverse. But I have seen a fair amount of discourse in the community over this. So what exactly is this discourse? Well, every character can only equip 12 total cost of echoes. Characters in Wuthering Waves can equip echoes in a few different ways, with one of them being 2 4-cost echoes with 3 1-cost echoes, which is the 44111 build that uses 11 out of the 12 cost. Meanwhile, the 43311 setup equips 1 4-cost echo, 2 3-cost echoes, and 2 1-cost echoes. This uses up all 12 out of 12 cost. Now, different cost echoes can have different main stats, with 4 cost echoes providing the much desired crit rate and crit damage, and the 3 cost echoes providing the highly desired elemental damage or attack percent. Now, 4 cost echoes are generally easier to farm, with the 2 pity drop system allowing you to alternate between a couple of world bosses with conveniently placed waypoints, allowing you to farm one of them every 2 to 3 minutes. On top of that, there's 7 main stats, so the chances of you getting the desired crit stat is 1 in 7, or 2 in 7 if you're fine with either crit main stat. Meanwhile, 3 cost echoes are generally more tedious to farm, at least to farm infinitely, as you have to go around the map killing a bunch of elites, and since there are 11 different main stats, the chance of getting the correct elemental main stat is much lower. On top of that, there's a limited number of 3 cost echoes in your overworld, and they just respawn once a day. So if you have a lot of extra time to farm, you'll run out of 3 cost echoes to farm, and you'll have to start bugging your friends to go into their worlds to steal theirs. And this debate stems from whether or not 44111 is a reasonable alternative to 43311. And specifically, this is mainly an issue for Electro and Havoc elements, at least as of release, as these are the only 2 elements with 2 different 4-cost echoes. And even more specifically, this is more so of a discussion for the Electro element, since Electro only has 2 farmable 3-cost echoes in the overworld, and there's actually barely any of these dumb birds or I don't know what these things are in the overworld. As such, we will primarily be talking about how good the 44111 and 43311 setups are for the Electro element. Now that we've sown the seeds of the greatest discourse in video game history, it's time to have a calculation showdown. For these calculations, I will be assuming an easy peasy Yinlin rotation at sequence 0, level 90, and with her signature weapon at refinement 1, the String Master. No team buffs are included in these calculations, and this is an extremely simplified set of calculations, but it's better than nothing. It goes without saying that different characters in different situations, with different buffs, with different teams, against different enemies, in different dungeons, will have different results, but we can at least get a general idea. In the first corner, we have 43311, which will be the baseline for our calculations. This heavy hitter is legendarily known as BIS, or Best in Slot. Will 43311 be completely unstoppable, or will any other contestant stand any chance against it? Alright, enough of those shenanigans, because I'm going to lose my whole voice if I do that, but here's the whole damn chart. Okay, at least most of the chart. There are a few interesting takeaways from this chart, with the first being that for 43311 with double Electro, you can use an attack percent main stat instead of an Electro percent main stat, and still be within just a few percentage points behind when it comes to Yinlin's damage output. Other characters have a larger or smaller difference, but knowing this, attack percent is actually a great alternative for the elemental 3-cost echoes. And this means that you've essentially doubled your chance to actually actually get a usable echo for your electro set, having attack percent as another option. And frankly, all an attack percent 3-cost piece would need to outperform a 3-cost lightning damage piece is one additional crit or attack percent roll. So knowing this, we already have a great alternative to the double electro 3-cost setup. Sadly though, after this is where things start to go downhill. We have a 2-piece Void plus 2-piece Lingering Tunes combination. This starts to fall significantly behind as we're missing the 15 to 30% electro damage from the 5-piece set bonus of the 5-piece Void. We're talking around 91.5% of the 5-piece Void's 43311's damage. And up next we have 44111, the main topic of this video and the underdog. And well, it also does around 10% less damage than the 43311. This likely isn't news for most of you all, as we all probably know that mathematically 44111 is overall worse. But let's move on before I actually talk about when and how the 4411 could be worth it. Lastly, we have the goofiest and the funniest suggestion that I've seen floating around and that people have told me about, but it is the double electro rainbow setup. What does a rainbow setup mean? Well, it means that you have no 2-piece set bonus. I've seen people claim that a rainbow double electro set is better than the 44111, and I have no idea what these people are smoking. I've been trying to conceive of why anyone would suggest this, and I do think I've thought of one plausible scenario. Let's say you've got a really good 4-cost crit piece on a different set for a different character, but you just want to use it on your newest shiny waifu that you just pulled out of the gacha. So you slap a Dreamless on Yinlin and call it a day. Then you manage to get an electro 3-cost Lingering Tunes, so you slap that bad boy onto Yinlin as well, thinking, okay, I'll want this Lingering Tunes piece leveled up eventually for Calcaro. Then you miraculously got an electro 3-cost for the Moonlight set, and you're thinking, this could be used in the future for my Yinlin to support my Calcaro. Oh, and you already have a good 1-cost Fusion Echo because you were an Encore main at the beginning of this game, and you got another random off-element 1-cost attack Echo that rolled pretty decently. This is the only conceivable reason why I can think of people using a rainbow build, but you know what? Here it is. In this situation, when you just want to use your shiny new waifu and can't be bothered to farm yet, then sure, this is indeed better than literally not having any echoes equipped at all. However, not only is this situation pretty contrived, this brings me to the most important tip in this video. Do not level up offset elemental pieces. You might have just gotten an electro damage Glacio set 3-cost Echo and be tempted to level it up for your Yinlin, but just don't. Crunch that Echo into a different Echo and sacrifice it. Do not level this, as it will literally be the first thing that you'll trash the moment you have the opportunity to. Rainbow builds are just terrible in this game and should be avoided. Think of it this way, you're sacrificing the 5-piece set bonus, which is 40% electro damage, to achieve this rainbow build. A 3-cost electro piece provides 30% electro damage. This offset 3-cost electro piece fully leveled, which believe me costs about 2 to 3 days of resources for a free-to-play player, does not even make up for the 5-piece set bonus that you're missing. So unless you're planning to use the electro main stat on Lingering Tunes or the Moonlit, there is literally zero reason to level off element 3-cost echoes. Anyway, this brings me to my next point. When is 44111 viable? First of all, I think it's actually fine to farm 44111 if you haven't already farmed an electro set and you're planning on building both Yinlin and Calcaro. This way you'll have 2 good 4-cost pieces to eventually set them both up with 43311 sets. This means that it's perfectly viable, while you're farming for both characters, to use a 44111 set on one of them in the meantime. In other words, this is a solid early to mid-game farming option, and you won't even necessarily waste any resources since Calcaro is more than happy to get Yinlin's sloppy seconds. On top of this, it generally takes much longer to farm good electro 3-cost pieces because there are very few electro 3-cost elites in the overworld. However, you can endlessly double farm both the Thundering Mephis and Tempest Mephis. where if done correctly, you can farm about 1.5 of these every 3 minutes. So yeah, 44111 is perfectly viable as your first set, because you're very likely to find a good use for your second 4-cost Echo if you're going to use Yinlin plus Calcaro. However, if you're not planning to use both Yinlin and Calcaro, at least in today's meta, I actually don't recommend farming the 44111, as you'll be spending a lot of your resources on this setup with significant waste when you eventually migrate over to 43311, especially without having 2 electro characters to distribute these pieces to. Now there actually is one more I'm just farming reason to use the 44111 setup, and while I personally don't recommend it, 44111 is competitive if you can get around 3 to 4 additional substats like 3 more crit rolls. And this is honestly a bit unlikely, and I would personally just be patient and farm better 3-cost Echoes eventually. And let's also just quickly circle back to the Rainbow set. Given that once every piece has attack percent and both crit substat rolls on them, getting more substats starts to have less impact as flat attack and type percent damages become the next best options. As such, in order for a Rainbow set to do better, you'll need 22 ideal substats, and that doesn't even leave room for energy regen, which is pretty absurd to even consider. As such, Rainbow builds are not something I can ever recommend for you to spend any of your resources into, but they are literally I don't have any Echoes yet, so I'll slap this on my shiny new Dami Mommy to try her out. It's also worth mentioning that Kuro Games has been giving us even more ways to get the correct main stat on 3-cost Echoes via the 2 most recent events, making 43311 farming a bit easier. Also, if you're farming Tacit Fields, which you'll need to for Echo experience, Tacit Fields have given me quite a few Electro 3-cost pieces. Finally, attack percent is also a very viable alternative to elemental damage for your 3-cost Echoes. So with just a bit of patience, 43311 is definitely the way to go, especially if you're only building a single Electro character. So yeah, hopefully this settles the 44111 versus 43311 debate once and for all. Now, obviously, I, as an individual, don't have the power to end this debate, but I figured I'd at least present my arguments towards this topic. Let me know if I missed anything and what you think about this highly controversial and tumultuous discussion. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Win to Lose, signing out.